Desire has always been one of the most compelling, intoxicating, and unsettling forces in the human experience. At its core, sexual attraction does not operate like a gentle breeze, guiding us softly toward affection or companionship. Instead, it strikes more like lightning, igniting within us a primal energy that can feel irresistible, irrational, and deeply consuming. This energy, which Carl Jung and other psychoanalytic thinkers often link to the unconscious, is far more than a biological impulse to reproduce. It is a symbolic and psychological current that reveals hidden truths about who we are, what we lack, and how we unconsciously seek completion. When most people think about sexual attraction, they frame it in terms of romance, love, or physical chemistry. But beneath these surface-level explanations lies something far more enigmatic. Desire is not simply about pleasure or even intimacy. It is about projection, power, longing, and the confrontation with the unknown parts of ourselves. Sexual attraction, in this sense, becomes a mirror of the psyche, a force that draws us toward others not only because of who they are, but because of what they awaken in us. Jung often spoke of the shadow, the hidden side of the psyche that contains everything we deny, suppress, or refuse to acknowledge about ourselves. Desire is deeply entangled with the shadow. We are attracted to those who embody traits we feel are missing in ourselves, or who awaken qualities we have buried. For example, a person who projects strength, confidence, or wildness might captivate someone who feels timid, restrained, or overly controlled. The attraction is not random. It is the psyche's way of pointing us toward unresolved tensions and hidden potentials. In this sense, sexual desire reveals as much about the seeker as it does about the one desired. But this hidden power of desire is not innocent. The unconscious nature of attraction makes it volatile and unpredictable. People often speak of falling for someone, as if struck by an external force beyond their control. This language captures the destabilizing quality of desire. It takes hold of us, unseats our rationality, and compels us toward choices we might never otherwise make. It bypasses logic and awakens primal, instinctive drives that can be both exhilarating and terrifying. The hidden power of desire lies in its ability to disrupt. It can tear apart carefully constructed lives, dissolve rigid moral codes, and overwhelm years of discipline in a single moment of intoxication. People abandon careers, families, and identities under its influence. Societies throughout history have feared and sought to control sexual desire precisely because of this disruptive potential. Religions impose rules of chastity, laws attempt to regulate sexual behavior, and cultures develop elaborate norms around courtship and marriage, all as a way of taming a force that resists containment. Yet repression never erases desire. It only drives it deeper into the unconscious, where it becomes even more powerful. Jung would argue that what we repress returns in distorted, exaggerated forms. The forbidden becomes more alluring, the inaccessible more intoxicating. This is why desire so often attaches itself to what we cannot have: the married partner, the socially unacceptable lover, the distant or unattainable figure. It is not the object itself that compels us, but the psychological tension between yearning and prohibition. What makes the hidden power of desire so unsettling is its dual nature. On one hand, it is profoundly creative. It inspires art, music, poetry, and countless acts of passion that shape human history. Entire civilizations have been built and destroyed in pursuit of desire. On the other hand, it is equally destructive. It can corrode trust, shatter families, and drag individuals into obsession, addiction, or despair. Desire does not obey moral categories. It exists as a raw energy, capable of manifesting as both divine inspiration and personal ruin. Jung's perspective reveals that sexual attraction is never simply about sex. It's about the psyche's longing for wholeness. When we are drawn to another, we are often unconsciously seeking union with the disowned parts of ourselves. The beloved becomes a projection screen carrying our anima or animus, the inner archetypal image of the opposite gender that represents qualities we have not integrated. This projection explains why attraction can feel so overwhelming, as though fate itself were pulling us towards someone. But it also explains why these relationships often collapse under the weight of expectation. No real person can live up to the archetype projected onto them. To grasp the hidden power of desire is to recognize its symbolic function. It points us inward, toward our own incompleteness. Instead of blindly pursuing the object of attraction, Jungian thought suggests reflecting on what this attraction reveals about ourselves. What qualities do we see in the other that we long for in ourselves? What fears or insecurities are awakened by the intensity of our desire? In asking these questions, we begin to transform desire from a force that controls us into a force that teaches us. Yet few are willing to confront desire in this way. Most either surrender blindly to it or attempt to repress it altogether. Both paths are dangerous. Blind surrender can lead to obsession, destructive choices, and cycles of pain. Repression, on the other hand, breeds distortion, secrecy, and inner torment. The path Jung envisioned was one of integration, facing desire honestly, acknowledging its symbolic meanings and learning from what it reveals about our shadow and our projections. The hidden power of desire, then, lies not only in its ability to disrupt and consume, but also in its potential to guide. It is a signal from the depths of the unconscious, pointing us toward what is missing, what is feared, or what is disowned within us. To engage with desire consciously is to step into a dialogue with the deepest layers of the psyche. It is not easy. It requires courage, honesty, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths, but it is also profoundly liberating. In the end, desire is both a danger and an invitation. It can destroy lives, but it can also open the door to self-discovery and transformation. To understand desire through a Jungian lens is to see it not merely as a biological urge, but as a psychic compass, guiding us toward integration. This is the hidden power of desire. It exposes us, unsettles us, and forces us to confront the parts of ourselves we would rather avoid. And in doing so, it holds the potential to make us whole.
Sexual attraction is not just a matter of biology, hormones, or instinct. Beneath its surface lies something far deeper, a psychological labyrinth where the unconscious reveals its most uncomfortable truths. Carl Jung believed that human beings are not only shaped by their conscious intentions, but also by their unconscious impulses, desires, and archetypes. Among the most powerful of these is what he called the shadow, the hidden, repressed, and often denied aspects of the self. When it comes to sexuality, the shadow plays an especially intense role, because sexual desire is both a life-affirming force and a mirror reflecting the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. The shadow in Jungian psychology is the collection of traits, impulses, and desires that we do not want to admit belong to us. It is everything that contradicts our carefully constructed identity, everything we push down because it feels socially unacceptable, morally wrong, or personally shameful. Sexuality exposes the shadow in a unique way. While we can repress anger, envy, or pride, sexual desire often emerges with raw intensity, breaking through the barriers of control. Attraction sometimes surprises us, even shocks us, because it reveals something that feels alien, and yet it is our own. Why are we drawn to people who are not good for us? Why do we sometimes feel desire where reason tells us there should be none? Jung would argue that this is the shadow at work. The person we crave is often the embodiment of something hidden within ourselves, qualities we have denied, emotions we have buried, or aspects of power and vulnerability we are afraid to confront. Desire, then, is not simply about the other person. It is a reflection of our unacknowledged self. This explains why sexual attraction can be both intoxicating and terrifying. On one hand, it promises intimacy, pleasure, and connection. On the other, it threatens to expose what we are hiding from ourselves. We may long for someone because they represent qualities we wish we could embody: boldness, freedom, intensity. Or we may feel consumed by desire for someone who mirrors the darker side of our psyche: aggression, dominance, or submission. In every case, sexuality becomes a battlefield between the persona we show the world and the shadow we keep locked away. Jung warned that when the shadow is ignored, it does not disappear. Instead, it grows stronger, acting out in unconscious ways. In sexuality, this can lead to unhealthy patterns, obsessive attraction, destructive relationships, or compulsive behaviors. We repeat these patterns not because we consciously choose them, but because the shadow is demanding recognition. Every forbidden attraction, every inexplicable craving, is a signal that something within us is asking to be seen. Consider how often desire clashes with morality or social norms. Entire cultures have created strict codes around sexuality. Laws, taboos, rituals, not just to regulate behavior, but to suppress the unruly force of the unconscious. The shadow resists control, and because sexual energy is so primal, repression often leads to distortion. The more we deny the shadow, the more it manifests in hidden, often destructive ways. Secret affairs, double lives, or unhealthy fixations. But Jung did not see the shadow as purely negative. For him, integration of the shadow was one of the essential tasks of individuation, the process of becoming a whole and authentic self. Sexual attraction, uncomfortable as it may be, provides an opportunity for this integration. When we recognize that our desires reflect disowned aspects of ourselves, we can begin to understand and accept them. This does not mean we must act on every impulse, but rather that we stop pretending those impulses do not exist. For example, if someone feels drawn to partners who are rebellious and wild, it may reveal a suppressed longing for freedom within themselves. Instead of shaming the attraction, they can explore what it means to bring more spontaneity into their own life. If another person feels desire mixed with fear towards someone powerful and controlling, it may point to their own complicated relationship with power, perhaps a hidden wish to assert themselves, or conversely, a tendency to surrender control. In this way, desire becomes a teacher, pointing us toward the parts of the self that are waiting to be acknowledged. The shadow in sexuality also explains why relationships are so often charged with projection. We imagine the other person is everything we lack, the savior, the seducer, the destroyer. But in reality, we are projecting our inner world onto them. Jung called this the anima and animus dynamic, where unconscious images of the opposite gender are projected onto others, creating an illusion of irresistible attraction. This projection is not about the other person at all. It is about us. Recognizing this can be profoundly liberating because it allows us to reclaim our own power rather than giving it away to fantasies. To confront the shadow in sexuality requires courage. It means admitting that we are not always as noble, pure, or rational as we like to believe. It means looking at our own capacity for obsession, jealousy, or manipulation and owning it instead of blaming it on others. It means accepting that sexual attraction is not always about love or compatibility, but about something deeper, the psyche's attempt to heal itself by bringing the unconscious into awareness. Yet this confrontation is also the path to freedom. When we integrate the shadow, we are no longer controlled by it. Desire loses its compulsive grip because we understand its origin. Attraction becomes less about possession and more about self-knowledge. Sexual energy, instead of being repressed or distorted, can be transformed into creativity, vitality, and connection. Jung believed that every confrontation with the shadow, no matter how painful, is ultimately a gift, an invitation to become more whole. In the end, sexuality is not just about the union of two bodies. It is about the dialogue between the conscious self and the unconscious shadow. Every attraction, every fantasy, every forbidden longing is a message, a mirror, a clue. To explore this dimension of desire is to explore the depths of the human soul. And while it may be unsettling, it is also profoundly empowering. For in the shadow, hidden in the places we fear to look, lies the energy that can transform us. not only in our sexual lives, but in our journey toward authenticity and inner freedom.
Sexual desire has always been one of the most mysterious and destabilizing forces in human existence. But when seen through the prism of power, its true influence becomes clear. It is not simply about attraction, reproduction, or intimacy. It is about the way human beings negotiate dominance, submission, control, and vulnerability. Desire, when fused with power, creates a dynamic that is both magnetic and terrifying. It is in this volatile intersection that much of human psychology, relationships, and even social structures find their hidden roots. At its core, sexual attraction touches upon the most primal elements of the psyche. It bypasses reason, undermines stability, and introduces irrational impulses into the lives of otherwise rational beings. But it is not desire alone that exerts such influence. Desire without power is an isolated longing, a private flame. It is when power enters the equation that desire gains the ability to shape relationships, influence behavior, and establish hierarchies. Desire, when fused with power, creates a dynamic that is both magnetic and terrifying. It is in this volatile intersection that much of human psychology, relationships, and even social structures find their hidden roots. Carl Jung's theories help illuminate this hidden entanglement. In his framework, sexuality is not merely a biological instinct, but a projection of the unconscious. The shadow, the anima and animus, the archetypes that dwell within us, all of them spill into the way we desire others. But what often goes unspoken is that these unconscious projections also become tools of power. To seduce, to attract, to dominate another through the magnetism of sexuality is not simply to experience a personal hunger. It is to bend another to your will, to rewrite the balance of who holds influence, who submits, and who resists. Desire and power converge most visibly in relationships. The dynamic between two individuals often plays out like a hidden negotiation. Who leads? Who follows? Who has control? Who concedes? On the surface, it may look like affection or passion, but underneath, every kiss, every word, every gesture carries the weight of this negotiation. To be desired is to have power, because it places the other in a state of longing, of pursuit, of imbalance. Conversely, to desire intensely is to relinquish power, to place oneself at risk of manipulation, rejection, or dependency. This is why seduction is one of the oldest and most enduring strategies of control. Seduction weaponizes desire, using the vulnerability of longing to create influence. In politics, in art, in culture, and in private relationships, those who understand how to wield the tools of seduction often rise to power. From ancient rulers who displayed beauty and charm alongside military might, to modern celebrities who cultivate an aura of unattainable desire, the connection between sexuality and authority is undeniable. The person who holds the gaze, who commands attention, who ignites desire in others without yielding to it themselves, wields immense power. Yet this intersection is not only about control over others, it is also about the ways we can be controlled. To be enslaved by one's own desire is to lose autonomy. The individual who cannot resist temptation, who constantly chases the object of longing, is not free. In this sense, power and desire create a paradox. The same force that grants us influence over others can also strip us of our independence. This explains why sexuality is so often feared, repressed, and surrounded by taboo. It is not merely about morality, but about the recognition that desire destabilizes control. It can dethrone rulers, ruin reputations, and dismantle the structures of authority that societies cling to. Jung would argue that much of this dynamic originates in the unconscious projections that drive desire. When we fall for someone, when attraction overwhelms us, We are not simply seeing them as they are. We are seeing them through the lens of our anima or animus, the archetypal opposite that lives within us. This makes attraction inherently unbalanced because it involves surrendering a part of ourselves to the projection we have cast upon another. But here is where power slips in. Whoever embodies that projection becomes a figure of immense influence in our inner world. We are, in effect, giving them the keys to a hidden part of ourselves. And whether they realize it or not, they can wield that power. The danger lies in how easily this power can be abused. History is full of stories where sexual magnetism has toppled leaders, altered wars, and reshaped societies. The biblical tale of Samson and Delilah, the legends of Cleopatra, the scandals of modern political figures, all of these point to the disruptive force of sexual power. It is not that desire alone changed the course of events, but that the one who harnessed it was able to control the will of another, sometimes to catastrophic effect. These are not simply tales of passion, they are lessons about the vulnerability created when power and desire collide. In everyday life, the consequences may be subtler, but no less significant. Relationships built on imbalanced desire often spiral into toxicity. The one who is less invested, less desirous, often holds greater power, while the one who is consumed by longing becomes vulnerable. This asymmetry leads to manipulation, dependency, and emotional suffering. It is why some people deliberately withhold affection, knowing that creating scarcity increases the perceived value of their attention. It is why others exploit sexual attraction in professional or social settings to gain influence. The underlying truth is simple. Where desire exists, power is never far behind. But it is not all darkness. The intersection of desire and power also offers an opportunity for self-awareness and growth. To recognize how desire can be both empowering and enslaving is the first step towards mastering it. This doesn't mean repressing sexuality or denying its force, but rather understanding its mechanisms. If we can see how unconscious projections shape our attractions, we can begin to reclaim some of the power we surrender. If we can observe the dynamics of control that play out in our relationships, we can resist falling into roles of either manipulator or victim. Awareness in this sense is liberation. Jungian psychology points us towards integration. By confronting the shadow, by acknowledging the projections of our anima or animus, we begin to reclaim ownership of our desires. Instead of being led blindly by them or using them destructively against others, we can channel them into deeper understanding and authentic connection. In doing so, the toxic entanglement of desire and power can transform into something more balanced. Not the erasure of tension, but the conscious navigation of it. The intersection of desire and power will always remain dangerous territory. It is charged with intensity, seduction, and the potential for abuse. But it is also a gateway into the deepest truths of human psychology. To understand this dynamic is to understand not only how we relate to others, but also how we confront our own inner forces. Sexual attraction is not just about longing. It is about power, vulnerability, control, and the fragile boundaries between them. The challenge and the opportunity lies in learning to walk this tightrope with awareness, refusing to be enslaved by desire while also refusing to use it destructively against others. In the end, the story of desire and power is the story of humanity itself. It is the tension between freedom and control, between passion and reason, between the unconscious and the conscious. To stand at this intersection with clarity is to see ourselves more fully, as creatures of instinct and projection, but also as beings capable of transcending the pull of both. And perhaps that is the ultimate act of power, not to dominate others through desire, and not to be enslaved by it, but to hold it, understand it, and transform it into a source of authentic strength.
In a world where desire is endlessly commodified, where bodies are transformed into billboards and attention is the most precious currency, the possibility of genuine connection feels increasingly elusive. Sexual attraction, as powerful as it is, rarely points us toward truth by itself. It often pulls us into projection, into illusions of who we think the other person is or who we hope they might be. Carl Jung, with his deep insights into the unconscious, saw this clearly. Much of what we call love is often desire entangled with shadow, fantasy, and unmet needs. To move beyond desire is not to reject it, it is to see it clearly, to strip it of its illusions and to use it as a doorway towards something deeper, authentic connection. Desire, by nature, is restless. It lives in longing, in the hunger for what we do not yet have. It is intoxicating because it fuels imagination and anticipation, but it is also unstable. Left unexamined, desire leaves us chasing phantoms, idealized versions of partners, relationships, or moments that exist more in our psyche than in reality. This is where the danger lies, mistaking desire for connection, mistaking intensity for intimacy, mistaking longing for love. The more we collapse these distinctions, the more we remain trapped in cycles of pursuit and disappointment, confusing passion with bond and chemistry with commitment. To move beyond desire requires courage. It means daring to question not only what we feel, but why we feel it. Why does a certain person awaken such an overpowering pull in us? Why does attraction sometimes burn brightest where danger lurks? Often, it is because the unconscious recognizes something familiar, an echo of our unresolved wounds, a mirror of our forgotten longings, or a projection of our hidden shadow. The thrill we feel can be the thrill of recognition, but recognition of what? Not of the other person as they truly are, but of parts of ourselves we have disowned or denied. Until we understand this, we risk confusing shadow work for soul bond. Real connection begins when the veil of projection lifts, when we stop seeing the other as a canvas for our fantasies and start encountering them as a complex, imperfect, and evolving human being. This shift is disorienting at first because it requires us to let go of the intoxicating dream of the ideal partner. It demands that we learn to stand in the sometimes uncomfortable reality of who the other person is and who we ourselves are. In this space, intimacy ceases to be about chasing highs and becomes about building depth. It transforms from an act of pursuit into an act of presence. Beyond desire, connection thrives on honesty. Not the performative honesty of confession, where we reveal ourselves for validation, but the vulnerable honesty of being seen as we truly are. To stand before another with our masks down, with our imperfections visible, and with our fears acknowledged, that is the beginning of intimacy. This honesty extends in both directions. We must allow others to be flawed, contradictory, and human, without demanding that they fulfill the roles scripted by our desires. Only then can two individuals meet in truth, beyond illusion. There is also an element of surrender in moving beyond desire. Desire wants control. It wants to possess, to merge, to guarantee outcomes. Connection, however, asks us to surrender control, to dwell in uncertainty, to allow space for the unknown. To truly connect is to risk, because we cannot script the outcome of authentic encounter. This risk is frightening, but it is also liberating, because it frees us from the endless treadmill of desire. It allows us to move from craving to communion, from hunger to nourishment. The spiritual traditions of many cultures have long recognized this distinction. Mystics speak of moving from eros, the fiery, consuming passion, toward agape, the steady, compassionate love that transcends possession. This does not mean repressing eros, but integrating it. Desire becomes fuel, not for endless pursuit, but for the expansion of heart. In this integration, sexuality is no longer about escape or conquest.
but about the deepening of presence and awareness. It ceases to be a battlefield of power and projection and becomes a ground of shared growth. Real connection also requires time. Desire is impatient. It wants immediacy. It thrives in urgency. Connection unfolds slowly, often awkwardly, through shared silence, through conflict, through disappointment, through the willingness to stay present even when the initial fire cools. It is in these spaces, when desire wanes, that the truth of connection is tested. Do we remain not because we are intoxicated, but because we are committed to seeing and being seen? Do we stay not because the other fulfills a fantasy, but because their reality calls forth our own? Perhaps the greatest challenge in moving beyond desire is learning to love without illusion. This does not mean extinguishing desire, but liberating it from fantasy. It means seeing desire as a signal, a starting point, but not the destination. Attraction may draw us together, but it is not enough to sustain us. What sustains is the daily practice of presence, patience, and vulnerability. It is the choice to meet the other person not as an object of desire, but as a partner in the ongoing work of truth. In this way, moving beyond desire becomes a path of personal transformation. Every encounter becomes an opportunity to recognize our own projections, to confront our shadow, and to expand our capacity for authentic connection. It is not easy work. It demands self-awareness, emotional resilience, and a willingness to sit with discomfort. But the reward is profound. A form of intimacy that is not fragile, not dependent on constant stimulation, but rooted in trust, respect, and mutual growth. To live beyond desire is not to reject the beauty of attraction, but to put it in its rightful place. It is to see desire as a powerful force, but not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is connection, not the fleeting intoxication of being desired, but the enduring nourishment of being known. Not the restless hunger for more, but the steady grace of enough. Beyond desire, we find not the loss of passion, but the birth of presence. And in presence, we discover the possibility of love that is neither illusion nor possession, but liberation.